Welcome to Life, Lessons, and Laughter with your host, Glenn Ambrose.
Hey everybody, welcome to the show. So today we are talking about how to grow spiritually. So I had to write this down. I actually have notes today. This is the first.
I'm so excited when you have notes. It's not the first time, but
No.
it's out of like 100 and something, 170 podcasts. This is probably the fourth time max that you've had notes.
Yeah. So I didn't want to like stumble over the phrasing, so it's how to grow spiritually. There's three parts to it: understanding intellectually, absorbing conceptually, and implementing physically. Un, deux, trois. Uno, dos, tres. So, yes, I'm trilingual.
Very nice.
So yeah, I think with these things we have to know for right off the bat is there's no particular order. Sometimes they can happen all at once, kind of, that's a lot of times that's when we have like spiritual awakenings, we'll get like an intellectual understanding and a conceptual understanding all at once. And it's like this big, huge aha moment, that can really shift things. But even then we still have to implement what we've learned in a physical way because we're physical beings. So I think, actually, you know what? Let me put my light on too. So you guys can see me. Hey. Hi, everyone. Whoops.
Dude, you look so much okay, so for people who are just listening to this on Insight Timer or on the podcast feed, check out Glenn Ambrose's Facebook page and YouTube page, just Glenn Ambrose Life Coaching. And you can see these videos. Glenn looks amazing these days with the new platform that we have. Like your picture really pops, and it's really nice. Like your the whole package is very nice visually now, and this is starting to sound.
Are you
weird.
hitting on me? Holy crap!
No, but I like the look of from a production standpoint. Like I'm really excited. No. Although I was making a new logo yesterday, so I started to look at the old ones for Life Lessons and Laughter, and you have visually gotten more.
Now you're definitely hitting on me.
Yeah.
All right, now it's awkward. Okay.
How do we grow spiritually now that your light's on?
Yes, my light is on. So yeah, we have to, whether we learn it intellectually or whether we absorb it conceptually, we still have to implement it physically because we're vibrational beings. So that's when we actually shift our vibration, is like living a certain way, standing in it. And that's kind of like, that really anchors it in and helps the permanent change and really shifting our vibration. So, sometimes we'll intellectually learn something. Sometimes, we'll read a book or listen to a podcast. We'll go, oh yeah, wow, that makes complete sense. And we're such intellectual beings. A lot of times we think that's it. It's like math. Like once you understand math, like, 2 + 2 = 4. Like if you put them together, got it. Oh, okay. And then you think you're all done. And that's not how it works. It's, so the intellectual understanding is often the first step, but we can, how many times have people been on their spiritual walk? I mean, I know that it's happened to me where you get an intellectual understanding and you're like, oh, this is why I haven't moved forward. It's because of this. Got it. Okay, cool. And then 2 months later, you're still in the same place. And you're like, what the heck happened? How come I haven't transcended this? I thought I understood what the problem was. and a lot of times we have to absorb it on a conceptual level, like a bigger spiritual level, like a knowingness within us. That's why we can hear things multiple times intellectually, as far as our spiritual growth. And our life doesn't change because we're not actually absorbing it conceptually, in a spiritual perspective. That's more what we think of in a spiritual perspective. So, like, I'm trying to think of an example.
Please do.
Yeah.
Please think of an example.
Please think of an example. And I'm trying, so we might have to come back to it. Because if I try, it might not happen.
But that's something that happens literally to everybody all the time, and not just in a spiritual way, but you think that you know something, you're positive that you know it, and then you slip back into old habits immediately.
Right. And that's usually why. It's, because we haven't really absorbed it conceptually, and we haven't taken the action to implement it physically.
I think that a great example of that, because you're talking about implementing things physically, is we learn a lot of stuff now about like health and fitness and eating well and all of anybody on this planet could probably give you 5 tips to living a healthier life that they all know intellectually.
Right.
Like eat more vegetables, eat less carbs, go for a walk every day. These are things that we know make more sense. Eat less processed food, stuff like that.
Right.
But, even though we know them intellectually, we're not necessarily doing them.
Right. And that is a great example because it's,
Thank you so much.
Thank you for leading me here. The conceptualization aspect of that is understanding that it's an act of self-love. See, that's more spiritual. So like if you're sitting there going like, oh, I'll go for a walk tomorrow, and then you don't go, that's an act of disrespecting yourself, which is, a sign of low self-esteem and low self-love. So what we're doing is we're caught in a habit of disrespecting ourselves, not showing love to ourselves. And then we don't take the action to enhance our self-love. Well, why? Well, because conceptually we didn't even tie in the fact intellectually that this was tied to self-love. So which is the bigger concept. That's a spiritual concept. So if we understand the spiritual concept of self-love, and then we take the intellectual understanding and saying, okay, well, you know what? If I go for a walk every day, this is an act of self-love. And if I say that I'm going to and I don't, that's an act of disrespect. And I can't love somebody I don't respect, including myself. So when you really start absorbing this stuff conceptually, now all of a sudden, it's not just going for a walk. It's much deeper than that. It's bigger. It's a spiritual conceptual exercise, and it means a heck of a lot more, and it's more important. So once you get those two pieces, then you got to go for the damn walk, because that's the physical implementation of it. And that's what really shifts your vibration. You can sit on the couch all day long, understanding things conceptually and intellectually, but if you don't physically go for the walk, it doesn't, and it's the same thing with arguments. It's like, in your family, it's like, oh, well, I'm not getting along with this person that I'm in relationship with. Well, I understand that I'm not getting along with them. I need to set boundaries. Well, yeah, okay, I should set boundaries. But if you don't understand it conceptually, that basically if you don't set boundaries, you're not teaching this person how to treat you. And eventually you're setting the relationship up to fail because you're not taking the steps necessary to have an actual healthy relationship. Oh, okay, now I understand it. Now it makes more sense. And now I have to actually set the boundary and stand in it, because then what happens is everything has a vibration. Everything does. We live in a vibrational world. just filled with energy. It's just like we're a walking vibration. So, alcoholism has a vibration. Arguing has a vibration. Self-love has a vibration, so like setting boundaries has a vibration. Self-respect has vibration. So if we're in this body and we don't set boundaries, we are vibrating at a rate of one who doesn't set boundaries. And if we start setting boundary, like we can't change our vibration until we start actually setting the boundaries. We can think about it. We can understand why we should. We can even conceptualize and go, wow, I really get that this is a good idea and it's a big deal. But until we do it, we don't vibrate at the rate of one who sets boundaries.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So there.
Did we skip step 2?
No, that's the conceptual. That's the absorbing conceptually.
Okay.
But it's not necessarily step 2. Because they don't go in order. Okay. A lot of spiritual awakenings, as a matter of fact, go opposite. Like that's what happened to me. Like when I woke up, most of my awakenings came conceptually first. Because my brain was fried. Like I mean, I was pretty much a mess. I literally had trouble forming thoughts. I mean, I had been drinking and drugging real heavy for 2-3 straight years. After 17 years of doing it, I upped it for the last like 2 or 3. So. And that's not easy to do for me to up it. I was pretty up. But so my brain was fried. But a lot of when I was awakening spiritually, it was very large concepts. I was like, oh my God, like there's no control in life. Like I understood it conceptually. Like I was just like, there's just, I've been walking. I remember driving down the road and thinking to myself, like, oh my God, I've been like trying to control life. And I would start laughing, just bursting out laughing at how ridiculous it was. Because inside I got the concept that you can't control life. Like there's a flow to it. And it's just like, it's all good. And I don't, with my little perspective in this little human world, with my little experiences, how could I know what the universe wants and what God wants and all this? Like it was so silly to me. I just started laughing, driving down the road because I would understand these huge concepts. But then I needed to wrap my brain around them intellectually because I couldn't communicate a lot of this stuff with other people because I didn't have the words. And it was just like, I think a good example is like Einstein, Einstein, as well as a lot of other great artists, inventors, what we consider great intellectual minds, that the information came to them in moments of stillness. So, I've heard it said that like Einstein didn't come up with the theory of relativity. Like it just came to him in a moment of stillness. He understood it conceptually. The reason he studied mathematics and science for all those years was not to come up with the theory. That was given to him from the ether, the reason he needed to study math and science for all those years was to be able to take the concept that was gifted to him and birth it into this world using language and science and mathematics in a way that the rest of us would understand it.
That's the same with music. I mean, most, at least, if not all, I don't think I've ever heard a musician who didn't say this. There are songs that come to that they have to work hard for, that they want, but some of the greatest songs you've ever heard came in an instant to people who were, they spend their entire life learning their instrument and learning notation and all of that stuff to explain the language of it, but the actual song itself is an inspiration that comes to them in a moment where, they're going out for a walk or they're driving or they're,
stillness.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's it, and it's exactly the same. And it's, so there's that intellectual part, and there's the conceptual part. The conceptual part is more body based. It's more, depending on what you believe, it's more soul based. It's more connection to divine wisdom based. It's grander and it's larger than anything we can do intellectually. But a lot of times we need the intellectual part to bring it into this world so others can experience it and to talk about it. Right. That was a lot of what I did. Like my first, in the beginning, I I woke up to everything in 3 months. It was nuts. And then I spent the next 6 years learning language, because I was that took me a lot longer. Because conceptually, it's just poof a lot of times. They just, because you can't try to get something conceptually. It does happen in moments of stillness. You either get it, it just comes to you all of a sudden. You don't go looking for it, really.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, when I was reading all those books for like 5-6 years and listening to all the CDs and audio and watching movies and all that, I was just devouring information. And at the time, I thought I was learning spirituality, and I realized that I wasn't learning spirituality. I was learning a language to birth what I already had found out conceptually into this world. So
yeah, that makes sense.
So and then after I learned the language, all of a sudden everything stopped. I was trying to read and I was just like, I just couldn't read. And I was like, why can't I was devouring books. Like for me, I was, reading 20 or 30 books a year. Like that's unheard. I'm not a reader, so that's unheard of. Like for me to get through 2 books a year is good. So it's like, so for me to do 20 or 30, it's like, whoa, and then all of a sudden it just stopped and I couldn't take in any more information. And it was because I was being guided. It was like I understood conceptually first, and then I learned intellectually the language and everything. And then now what the universe was trying to get me to do was to implement what I learned into physically, which for me was not just living it in my life, but it was also, and even more important, well, I don't know if not more importantly, but it was also teaching it. My calling is to teach it. So, I needed to start teaching. And the universe was like, you got it conceptually, you got it intellectually, you have the language. Now you need to get out there and start teaching it. And we need to shut you down from taking in more information, because you'll just sit here getting addicted to, reading books for another 5 years, and that's not what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be birthing it into the world now.
For sure. That makes sense to me a lot. And my question is, everything that you just said reminded me of the conversations that we've had about teenagers and children, knowing, so we just did a podcast that, so for a long time we were uploading older episodes that were not originally released on Insight Timer up to Insight Timer, and we've caught up with ourselves now. But I was just going through the Spirituality by Any Other Name podcast that we did like a year and a half ago or something, and you talked about how people understand, how like the younger generations are understanding these concepts even if they're not calling them the right things. And then also, a show that I go back to a lot is Like a Child. And I think that we were pulling quotes or something from that blog a while ago. And both of those concepts is the key word here, remind me of what you're saying right now, because, and my question is about spirituality. And you've talked about on the show in several different aspects, kids having these concepts and understanding these concepts, and then but instead of learning the language about them, they learn the society, they learn like everything else. And because we learn everything else, then we forget, which is why another phrase that you've said is like learning a spiritual truth is like remembering a spiritual truth. So since we're talking about building and how to build your spirituality, what do you think about that? What do you think about the fact that a lot of this is stuff that we'll probably understand conceptually first because it's stuff that we know like in our core. Do you think that that's true, or am I talking a bunch of crap?
You're talking about the crap.
All right, I'm out.
No, it's all no, it's all over the place. I mean, it's all over I don't think there's any. The path is different for everyone, and what I've seen with what we're talking about right now, the path is different within everyone. It's like, because sometimes I learn intellectually first and then conceptually, and then I implement it. Every once in a blue moon, I've implemented something physically and then understood it after. Like, just because the more you're on your spiritual path, that actually happens. I see it with my clients a lot.
Act yourself into better thinking.
Right. And a lot of times when you're working on yourself spiritually, like when you're heading in a direction, it's amazing how much support we get that we don't recognize. Like, some people will, like my clients, of course, they're on a spiritual path. So a lot of times they're working on themselves in different situations, and they'll, I won't talk with them for a couple of weeks. We get on the phone, they go, oh yeah, well, this happened, and then I did this. And I'm like, wow, that was perfect. Like, do you know what you just did? It's like, so you did this because you knew that, because of what this, and then it reinforced that. It's like, do you see how? And they're like, oh, wow, I didn't even see it that way. And it's because when we're leaning into our spiritual growth, we just unconsciously start behaving better physically, in physical ways, because we're leaning in towards it. It's just, we start falling back to our original nature, which is kind of what you were talking about earlier. Like, when we come into this world, we're coming from the other side. So, when you're a kid, you just know all this stuff. Like, you don't have to explain to a baby that everything is love and it's okay to be vulnerable.
No, you
like,
don't.
They just are. They're just vulnerable. They just expect to be loved. That it's just, why wouldn't I? I mean, everything's love, And then when we're here for a while, we learn society's dream of the planet instead of the truth, and we start forgetting that stuff. So a lot of this stuff, it does, it is about us remembering stuff we already know. And that's, when we do that, that's a conceptual aspect of what we're talking about. Because, like, if I'm talking to somebody and they're going, oh yeah, oh, holy crap, like, I really get that. Like, sometimes I'll stop and I'll go, oh, you really get that? Where do you feel it? You're like, in your head or in your body? Like, oh, I guess it's in my body. It's like, right, it's not an intellectual thought. When you really get something, it's a bodily sensation. It's just a knowingness within your heart or within your body.
So this morning, I was doing distance learning. I was helping out with distance learning, and for preschool.
I love that everything has a name now.
Yeah, and the book that we were reading today is a book that we have anyway called Plant the Tiny Seed. Where you and I just thought about, I just looked at the notes for the podcast and I saw the title and how to grow spiritually, and I was like, oh, that's really interesting. My entire morning has been talking about how to grow things. And I made a mistake this morning, and I think that it led me to a great question, which was, there was these little cutout things, and it was how to grow a plant. And you had to put it in order. He had to put it in order. He's 5. And you had to put it in order, add the soil, add the seed, water, wait patiently, I grew a plant, and I messed up.
Yeah.
I put the seed in and then add the soil, which I felt really really silly about. But it's funny, I say silly now instead of stupid because
Congratulations.
I felt stupid about it. Anyway, I was just thinking about the soil and how it takes a lot of time to grow something, and we're talking about growing spiritually. So I'd like to talk about the soil for a second, because you've handled the steps now. But my question is, as far as growing spiritually in the soil, your surroundings, like, how do we grow spiritually when our surroundings aren't great, when we don't have great soil? You know, there's the biblical verse about where the sower plants his seeds, and you know, on rocky soil it'll wither, it'll grow and then wither away. And
Well,
so let's talk about the spiritual soil, baby.
all right. Well, all work is self work.
But what about our environment?
Well, your environment isn't as important as you think it is. I mean, the soil that you're talking about is your internal soil. That's where the plants are being planted. The seeds are being planted. So you need to cultivate yourself internally and plant the seed there. It's not about the rest of the world. If we needed to fix the rest of the world before our seed grew, we'd be in deep crap. So so it's about us, you know. And it's like, I mean, and there's, you know how it is with spirituality. I say this all the time. There's overlap, you know, there's different concepts and different ways of thinking, and there's overlap. And so there's different ways of coming at the same thing. So in one way you could say that, you know, the seed is the intellectual part, and then you have to plant it in the soil of the conceptualization. And then acting physically is when the plant actually grows. You know, I mean, you can look at it that way. You can look at it like, you know, you need to open up spiritually. So whether the seed comes in an intellectual form or conceptual form, it has fertile ground in which to grow in.
And then I think the implementing is the taking care. So we had to read the book, and then we had to write out the things. And I was trying to explain to him that the thing that you need to do for a plant is to care for it, right? You have to take care of it, just like you have
physical
to grow,
action.
Just like you have to grow, like I was like, what am I doing for you right now? He was like, you're taking care of me. I was like, exactly. So that you can grow into a big person, and that you can be smart and be kind and all of this stuff. Like, that's what you need to do for your own spirituality, is care for it. And that's the physical action. That's the implementing the physical action.
Right, because like, you know, we've said a million times, everything is energy.
So I'm sorry I turned this into a preschool class.
So this is how we implement energy. You know, we put energy to something through physical action. So that's how it expands. You know, if you're growing a plant, it needs energy from sunlight, water, you know, and we need energy to grow. So if we put energy towards, if we take physical action and we actually do things, that part of us expands. So that's why, like, the first time, you know, you set a boundary, and then all of a sudden you start vibrating, that vibration expands, and it goes, ooh, you know, now I vibrate at the rate of somebody who sets boundaries sometimes. Then you set boundaries again. And then you go, I'm one who vibrates at the rate of someone who sets boundaries more often than not. You know, and then you set boundaries 5 more times, and then you start vibrating at the rate of one who usually sets boundaries, and then at the rate of somebody who always sets boundaries, you know, and then all of a sudden that's part of who you are as a being. You know, it's always interesting to me to like, when I start talking about this stuff, like it almost simplifies spiritual growth, because like a lot of times you go, oh, how can I change my life? How can I be happier? How can I be a better person? How can I be kinder? How can I be more loving? And we have all these ethereal questions that sound real big. And it's like, just do those behaviors. I mean, that's how. Like, I mean, so that's a good example of the part that we didn't touch on yet. So you can actually take physical implementation first and then get the concepts into intellectual understanding after. So you can just be like, I don't know, loving sounds freaking cool. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how my life's going to get better. I don't really get it, but it sounds like it might be a good thing. So I'm going to start doing it. And then you just go do it. And if somebody just goes out and starts doing it, all of a sudden they're like, ooh, I feel better about myself. And then they start getting it conceptually. And then intellectually they go, I did good stuff, feel better about myself. I intellectually get it that like, this is a good thing and why it's a good thing. And I'm going to continue doing it. So like, we don't necessarily have to understand it. We can just, so like I did something many years ago that I was, I was kind of wrestling with this, and I'm like, okay, how do I be the person I want to be? So it's like, well, who do I want to be? I want to have certain characteristics. So I made a list, and I was like, okay, what do I respect in other people? And I put like self-respect, integrity, honesty, kindness. And I made this list of all these qualities that I wanted to embody. And I left them there. And then like every once in a while, I wouldn't know what to do with a situation. And I'd grab my list and I'd be like, what would this guy do? This imaginary guy that has all these awesome qualities, what would that guy do? And I'd be like, well, he would obviously do this. I'd be like, okay, I'm going to do that then. So that's what I would do. And then all of a sudden, it was like 6 months later, I was doing that kind of regularly. And all of a sudden it just hit me. I was like, I was feeling really good about myself. And I was like, boy, I really love myself. Like, I'm a good person. And I started realizing, I really act out of integrity and honesty and love and kindness. And as I'm doing this, realizing this in my head, all of a sudden I realized that I'm talking about the paper that I wrote. And I'm like, oh my God, I think I'm that guy. How did I become that guy? And I realized, I was like, well, I just did what he did. What I thought he would do in different situations, and I became him. Isn't that interesting? So that's, I mean, sometimes we make it so difficult. Like, how can I change my life? It's like, well, just make a list of characteristics that you want to embody or that you respect of an imaginary person and do what they would do, So that was an example of I was making physical decisions and taking physical actions before I understood intellectually that I could actually become this person. I just thought it was kind of a good, little practice. I didn't fully understand what I was doing, So I didn't understand it intellectually, and I didn't even understand it conceptually, but I just thought it was kind of a neat little thing to do. So I started doing it. But I implemented it physically first, and then I got the intellectual and the conceptual after. So
that's great.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we can see how it can be prominent. It's like most things. It can be prominently one way, but sometimes the other two ways, usually most people have one way that's a little more prominent, and then sprinkles of the other two ways. Sometimes it's a mishmash of all of them. Sometimes, whatever. But what's important is those are the three parts. Understanding something intellectual, because we're completely intellectual beings, and we can know something in our heart, like it's good to be loving. And then we can actually try to take action to try to be loving. But if intellectually we're going like, you're a sap, you're a complete idiot. You're just, all you're doing is letting people walk all over you. This is never going to work long time. If that's your intellectual programming, then eventually your subconscious is going to override your conceptual and your physical, well, I mean, there's a chance. I mean, sometimes the physical might be strong enough where it wins out and then you get the intellectual understanding after. But at some point we have to get all three aspects.
Yeah.
So
sure.
It doesn't necessarily matter what order, but those are the three aspects of growing spiritually, because at one point or another, we need to have all three of them.
Amazing. I loved this episode. It was great, and I got a lot out of it, and I hope that a lot of people got a lot out of it, which is nice.
Yeah, I love it.
As always, I thought so this is our first podcast recording that you and I have done I mean, we've talked a lot and done some live shows and stuff, but we didn't do I was not on the podcast recordings a month ago. They were all Dave, so I didn't get to listen. I don't know what those shows were, so I got to listen to them afterwards, which was very nice. And it's nice. But what was great was the perspective of that. So like last night we debuted the first podcast with you and Dave, which was a very sensitive subject about loss, and I saw some comments immediately on it about and one in particular about how timely it was for that person. And because it wasn't me on the show, and because of the aspect of the personal nature of Dave's conversation in that episode, it reminded me about the impact that the things that we say on this show have on people's lives sometimes. And that was really cool and kind of powerful, and it was a nice perspective to not be the person on the show, so I didn't like blow it off, and that was really nice. So I just want to say thank you, everybody, for listening.
Yes, and thank you for your comments. And it does do that, because it's like, when I've said this a million times, when I'm talking, I just kind of disconnect my brain and just go, and stuff's flowing, and I never know where it's going to go, what direction it's going to take. So like, I'm kind of in some way disconnected, and I don't take credit for what comes, because I don't think it comes from me. So how can I take credit for it? So it's kind of, in some aspects with the recordings, I mean, I can feel the joy that I get when I'm doing it. And that's why I continue doing it, because it gives me joy in the moment. And that's enough for me, so that a lot of times that's it. That's the whole experience. I experience joy now, and then I go on with my life. But when I go back and read the comments and stuff, and how it's touched people and how it's helped people, it really helps me anchor down and go, hey, Glenn, you kind of like, you're helping people. And it's like, oh yeah, that's really nice. I'm happy. I'm happy that, I'm really happy that it helps people, makes you feel good inside.
Absolutely.
So it's great seeing those comments like that and stuff. And it really does help ground me with the work, and see that it really does make a difference in people's lives.
I couldn't agree more, obviously, because I also said it. But thank you very much. I just want to let everybody know that Glenn has a course out right now, Peace in a Pandemic, Navigating Your Way Through the COVID-19 Crisis, an 8-part series. He teamed up with Dr. Gina Madrigrano on that, and that course is available now. You can get it. You can just go to glenambrose.com and click on that. Ask Glenn Anything, of course, is the show that comes out every Friday morning.
That's the weekly, yeah.
glenambrose.com. Just sign up for the mailing list for that. And we're doing a live show right now for the foreseeable
future.
Future.
Literally right now.
No, but Thursdays at 6 on Glenn Ambrose Life Coaching on Facebook and Glenn Ambrose on YouTube. We're going live and answering your questions directly on there. We just did our first one of those. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was. And that's the beginning of May 2020, since like we've been doing this show for so long that, we really see how stuff like this, we might have to start throwing some dates out to give people an idea of when the heck it was recorded. Because sometimes people ask me something from like 6 years ago, and I'm like, I have no idea.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But we, as of May 2020, we are doing that live show on Facebook and YouTube Thursdays at 6 p.m. So check that out. You can ask your questions live and get them answered right then. So, and the more feedback we get on that, the better, of course. And check out everything at glenambrose.com. Thank you for putting that up, Ben. So I guess that'll do it, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Cool. So thank you everybody for listening, and Face Tail is waving goodbye behind me. It's time to go. All right. Bye, everybody.
Glenn is available for life coaching sessions. To book an appointment or for more information, go to glenambrose.com, follow him on Facebook and Twitter, or click the link in the description of this episode.